If your prototype worked perfectly on your desk, that's why it's going to fail in mass production. If nobody has warned you about this yet, you're walking into a very expensive surprise. If you're an entrepreneur trying to bring a physical product to market, this video is for you. The reason you run into this problem is because prototypes don't fail loudly, they fail politely. They sit there looking finished, doing their job, letting you think that everything's okay until you go to production. And that is when everything breaks. Today we're going to talk about why prototypes lie and mass production exposes every shortcut you took, and the mechanical design and manufacturing mistakes that caused your prototype to fail when real production got going. At the end, I'll explain the one successful shift that successful founders make in order to scale successfully, as opposed to those who keep going over and over with the same problems. This is a new channel for me, and I'm trying to get this information out. If you find it helpful, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out a lot. The big problem is the prototype confidence trap. Here's how it usually works. You build a prototype. It works. You show it to your friends. It looks legit. This feeling is dangerous. The purpose of a prototype is to confirm, does this idea work at all? Ask a different question. Can this product be made? Will it exist in the real world? These are very different questions. A prototype is a proof of concept. Production is a proof of discipline. Prototypes are built to cheat. And that's okay. Let me say this clearly. Prototypes are allowed to cheat. They use hand-fitted parts. They use loose tolerances. They use adhesives instead of fasteners. They use 3D printed parts. Much of this is not available in production. This isn't a flaw, it's kind of the point. There's nothing wrong with the fact that you cheated to make this prototype. It's forgetting that you cheated when you try to move to the next step. What worked once, slowly, with care, by hand, is not going to scale up into a rapid moving manufacturing environment. Your prototype didn't pass the test, it passed the demo. Chances are it's sitting on your desk, making a beautiful display and being used as intended. You didn't factor that your new fancy design is going to get thrown in the back of a hot car, get used by a 2-year-old as a hammer, or taken in the shower. However, these are only functionality concerns. Getting it through the manufacturing process is a whole nother can of worms. One of the biggest gaps between prototype and production is variation. Your prototype is perfect because it's one of one. Production is thousands of almost the same part. Plastic shrinks, metal bends, machines drift, tools wear out. Your prototype never saw any of that. When parts that were each within tolerance come together, nothing fits. Holes miss each other, cases don't close, buttons stick, and nobody understands why. The prototype worked. 3D prints are amazing, but they're also one of the biggest reasons that founders get blindsided when it comes to production. 3D prints don't shrink like injection molded parts. They have different strengths, they flex differently, and they hide stress points. Usually a 3D printed part is just for a fit test, and later has to be replaced with something that's stronger, more heat resistant, or just has different physical properties. Oftentimes, the material you want to use on the finished part can't be made cost effectively or at all. Prototypes don't care how something's made, but manufacturing does. Injection molding, CNC machining, sheet metal, they all have their rules. You have to worry about draft angles, minimum wall thickness, tool access, add-on ejection paths, and warping. Then you have bottlenecks such as time for drying, curing, or normalizing. Prototypes ignore this, but production forces them with invoices. A design that looks simple can turn into nitrate-coated tooling or nanotechnology. You might need advanced robotics and automation or laser welding. And then suddenly, your unit cost doubled. Not because it was a bad idea, but because it was never designed for manufacturability. Then you have the assembly fantasy. Most prototypes are made by one person who very carefully assembled each little piece to make sure everything was right. Production is assembled by many people at a very high rate, and oftentimes by the lowest bidder. That difference matters. If your product requires perfect alignment, a highly skilled assembler, or extensive testing afterwards, production is going to punish you. Assembly errors don't show up in the prototype stage because you're paying attention. In mass production, attention is expensive. If a part can be installed wrong, it will be. And trust me, hundreds of times. You won't know which assemblies were put together right and which ones were done wrong. And worse yet, you're not going to find out until they're already distributed through the supply chain. I put together a free cheat sheet for anyone who's going through this process. It's great for identifying the steps to make sure you don't miss anything. This is ideal for someone who hasn't started yet or someone who's partway through the process and just needs to make sure they're not missing anything. I've included a link in the description for the free download. In prototypes, you don't deal with tolerances like you will in a finished product. The parts just fit. In production, tolerances are math, and every variation adds up. That's how you end up with rattling products, stuck mechanisms, and stress cracks in final assemblies. Tolerance stack-up is invisible in prototypes, but brutal in production. There's an entire discipline in manufacturing called Six Sigma that is just there to monitor the variations in manufacturing processes. When you get into production materials, that changes everything. Many prototypes are made from close enough materials. The real materials are going to get chosen later. Sometimes the material that is ideal for a prototype is way too expensive for production. The prototype might be painted or coated with a material that doesn't scale well in the production stage. Some materials are conducive in low volumes, such as welded sheet metal, but don't scale well to larger productions. It's often desirable to replace a complicated welded or machined assembly into something that's injection molded. This completely changes the material properties of the part. You now have to deal with different strengths, chemical resistance, heat tolerance, and surface finishes. Switching materials can take a working design from a success to a failure overnight. In severe cases, you're basically starting over, but this time around, everything costs 10 times as much. A hinge that worked becomes too stiff. A snap becomes too brittle. Or a housing warps under heat. Material choice is not a detail. It fundamentally determines the fit, finish, and quality of your finished product. Speed changes the game. Your prototype was made slowly. Production is going to be made fast. That means less inspection and more mistakes. It means that you're going to be either making or losing more money per hour when it goes to production. You're now in high gear. Wherever you're going, you're getting there quick, so you better make sure you're going in the right direction. Processes that feel safe in low production break in high volume. Glue that sets eventually becomes a bottleneck. Manual alignments become inconsistencies. Judgment gets replaced with units per hour. Production doesn't slow down for your design. Your design has to survive production speed. The key to success is designing out failure points. Unfortunately, you will usually need to encounter these failure points before you know what they are. Over the years, I've seen hundreds of these failures, and they're usually based upon very specific materials and very specific situations. This has allowed me to build a mental database when I come into a new situation that has something related to the old one. None of my mechanical engineering training in my younger years would have replaced the empirical knowledge that I have gained over dealing with this in the real world. The physical world is complicated and the variables are unlimited. A good engineer will be able to understand this empirical data that they encounter in the real world and then take their training from school and apply it to the situation. The inability to learn from these failures will make you very limited in your skill sets moving forward. Once you've taken time to get your product really dialed in, then we have to talk about tooling. If your products are made through CNC machining or welding or some other low volume production process, it may not be that big a deal to make slight changes here and there as you evolve the product. However, if you really want something to lay awake at night and think about, order some tooling. This is needed for injection molded parts, stamped parts, cast parts, and extruded parts, to name a few. This really hits home when your tooling quotes come back, so you better know what you're doing. Suddenly, this prototype-friendly design seems really expensive in production. These costs can really add up when you have undercuts, tight tolerances, or cosmetic surfaces in multiple places. Even a small part can balloon to 10 times the cost if you overlooked a small feature or detail. Multiply this times the number of different parts you need to make, and this can add up very quickly. On a bright note, if you think about these details ahead of time, you can get cost-effective tooling and make a lot of parts and make them consistently and make them for a long time without ever having to think about it. However, tooling is an upfront cost, so if you don't take into account all the details of this early on, you can blow your budget before you even make a single product. You also have the hidden costs that come around when you get into production. When your prototype fails, you 3D print another part. When production fails, you scrap inventory, you rework tooling, and you delay your launch. Every fix now touches your schedule, your cash flow, and your confidence. Here's the real issue. Most founders treat production like a scaled up prototype. It's not. Production is a completely different system with completely different rules. Going from prototype to production is like the difference of making a ham sandwich and opening a restaurant. Prototypes just ask, can this exist? Production asks, can this exist cheaply, reliably, and repeatedly? And can it cover my upfront cost and make a profit in the future? Depending upon your industry, cost effectiveness is subjective. I've worked in both automotive and aerospace. They can have very different requirements. In aerospace, everything needed to work. In automotive, everything needed to work and also had to be cheap. In some ways, this made automotive more difficult because everything needed to work at 80% of the level of an aerospace part at 1/10 the cost. Make sure you have the right mindset of what to expect from your product. Beginners and experts both screw up. Beginners trust the prototype too much. Experts trust themselves too much. Beginners assume success means that they are ready to make it happen. Experts assume their experience covers the shortcuts they're going to take. However, experience is something you get right after you need it, and not all experience transfers to your new situation. Then you have the moment where everything breaks. The first article writes, it doesn't fit, it doesn't assemble, it doesn't feel right. At this point, the excitement of opening that new box of your product goes to fear quicker than that time that I realized the pretty girl at my door was serving me papers. At best, you will be able to rework the defective parts. So long as you did not do a large run, sometimes this isn't a huge deal. However, if the cost of the rework is more than the cost of the parts, scrapping everything is your best case scenario. If your timeline can't wait for another run of product, then you end up with far more money into reworking these parts than you paid for them in the first place. I had a situation like this where I outsourced thousands of machine parts to a company I work with in China. The parts came back They looked beautiful, but I went to assemble everything and they didn't fit. I accidentally sent an older version of my CAD file to the machine shop. The current model had a small cutout in the part because I needed clearance. I ended up having to set up my milling machine in my shop and cut out a notch in 1,000 parts. These parts had already been sandblasted and anodized, and after I machined them, I now had a raw aluminum feature. Not only was this highly time consuming and took away from other things I need to work on, but I ended up with a product that didn't look as good as it could have. In the grand scheme of things, this was actually pretty mild compared to some of the other things I've come across. Oftentimes, rework requires completely redesigning the part. And even worse, oftentimes this part needs to interface with another part that needs to be completely changed due to fit, finish, material properties, or some other unseen problem. This can be very frustrating because you look at your prototype and say, what's going on? This all worked before, and then it hits you. That prototype was not a product. It was an ideal, and it was a promise to potential customers. Production is where that promise then gets tested. So how do you make the production process work for you? The founders who succeed, they make one key shift. They stop asking, does this work? And they start asking, how does this fail? They design for variation, speed, assembly, cost. They assume mistakes will happen, and they focus around the most critical and precarious aspects of the design. That mindset changes everything. Prototypes are meant to break. They are not meant to impress people. The best prototypes are ugly. They reveal problems, they expose weak points, and they fail early. If your prototype only proves success, it hasn't done its job. Test everything to failure, not just in the desired cases, but in the edge cases that will push your product to its limits. If you pushed it hard and it still didn't break, there's more to learn. Push things hard enough, they will eventually break, and usually not in the way you expected. When something breaks, you have to decide, is that break acceptable? Sometimes if a part breaks in an acceptable way, in a way you weren't expecting, it turns out you were actually overbuilding another part of the product that you thought was going to break, and you might be able to save some money by reducing the strength of that area. That's because we tend to predict where we think a product will break, and we overbuild it there while ignoring something else. A good prototype saves you money by failing loudly. You have to think about prototypes in the right way. Prototypes are meant to look for fit, function, assembly order, and product abuse. Don't use prototypes to prove to yourself that you're done. You're not done until manufacturing and testing confirms it. So what are the real reasons the prototypes fail? Prototypes fail mass production because they were never designed to pass. In the back of our head, we may know that this is a prototype and it was not meant to validate production. However, when we push a prototype to failure, it sets us back. It makes us feel bad. And we don't like to be there. This tells us we're not as far along as we thought we were. We know that if we don't push this product to its limits, that we're going to regret it later. But it can be really hard to look for problems when you're trying to race for the finish line. Prototypes are meant to be a teaching tool, and we need to use that. It is the best education you will ever be able to buy. When founders mistake their learning tool as a finished product, production becomes the teacher. And don't forget, production charges an Ivy League tuition. If you remember one thing, remember this: a prototype that works once proves an idea. A prototype that works thousands of times at the extreme of the product intent proves the design. Don't confuse the two. Also, make sure you check out this video where I go over how one small mistake can cost you $10,000. Until next time.